Welcome to Clued in Mystery. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Brooke, and we both love mystery.
Hi, Brooke.
Hi, Sarah. I'm looking forward to speaking with you today about another modern great in the mystery space.
Yeah, me too. So, we are going to be talking today about Peter Robinson. It was so interesting to learn about him. 1987 introduced mystery fans to Inspector Alan Banks in the book Gallows. From that first novel, author Peter Robinson received award nominations, and over the course of his career, the list of awards he received reflects the broad appeal of his writing. It has been translated into at least 20 languages and earned awards from France, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Poland, the Crime Writers of America, the Crime Writers of Canada, who recognized him multiple times, including awarding him the Grandmaster Award, as well as the Anthony Award, Mystery Writers of America Edgar Award, Mystery Readers International McCavity Award, and several others. He was invited to join the Detection Club in 2006. According to his death notice, he sold over 8.75 million books, though I expect that the number is actually higher because there was another Banks novel published in 2023 shortly after his death. And it's easy to see why Robinson's novels were so well received. His writing is accessible and the mysteries are satisfying. At the start of the series, Banks, his detective, has a wife who plays a role in humanizing his character. Banks is curious and compassionate, appreciates music and whiskey, and at the beginning of the series, a good cigarette. His marriage shows signs of strain and ultimately ends after a few books. Robinson said in an interview in Quill and Quire, "I found as the series developed that what I was really doing was writing books about a man who happens to work as a policeman and about things that happen to him as he grows older." Born in 1950 in Yorkshire, where he set his Detective Banks series, Robinson moved to Canada in 1974 to study, first completing a Master's of Arts in Creative Writing and then later a PhD in English. He and his wife settled in Toronto, although they had a second home in the UK. Robinson died in 2022 following a brief illness. Just to speak to how well respected Robinson was in the mystery space, um, there is a video on his publisher's website of Ian Rankin, Michael Connolly, and Louise Penny sharing their memories about him after he died, and it's definitely worth a watch.
Yes, I loved learning about Peter Robinson. I know that I had read some, he began writing in the late 80s, and that was early teen years for me. And so I know that I had read a couple of his novels along the way, but it was so great to learn about him. I feel like he was such a kind and very generous guy. And I think that comes out in Detective Banks.
I agree, Brooke. And in this session with Louise Penny and Ian Rankin and Michael Connolly, um, they speak about his generosity and how he was, you know, so supportive of other writers. And there's actually a video as well of his celebration of life slash the book launch for his final book. And the speakers in that also talk about how, supportive he was of other mystery writers and how generous he was with his time um, around mystery writing. So he ended up teaching occasionally at some of the universities in Ontario, and I can only imagine how wonderful it would have been to take a course from him.
I know. I was thinking the same thing. And he and his wife also began the Peter Robinson Scholarship, which helps students from less advantaged backgrounds study English at Leeds. So I think that just speaks to like he loved education. He loved to help people, learn and study literature. And it, I agree. I would have loved to take a class from him. I also was interested that when he first came to Canada to study, one of his tutors was Joyce Carol Oates. So there's like,
Hmm.
such a gathering of just incredible authors there.
Yeah. But you made the point, Brooke, that a lot of that kindness and warmth is in we see that in Banks, and I would agree. He is a thoughtful detective who I think is quite understanding of the motivations
Mhm.
of the people he's investigating.
Right. I think that, this week I read, Gallows View. I went ahead and started at the beginning, and there's a couple times throughout the story that Banks just, like, basically just loses composure, either because he's so upset about what's happening to the
Hmm.
victims, and in this situation, there's a peeping Tom, which is only actually tangentially related to the murder that happens, but, he gets so emotionally caught up in it. And then another time, he's talking to a potential suspect and he just gets very angry. The way I was thinking, that's, the way that you want your big brother or your dad to stick up for you, because Banks is that invested in the investigation. It feels like it's not just a job for him. Although I loved the quote you mentioned that I hadn't come across that, where he realizes throughout the series that he's mostly writing about this man and happens to be a police officer. And I just love that that shines through as well.
Well, and um, we'll include links to a couple of interviews that I listened to where he talks about that he is a similar age to Banks, and you know you get the sense that he's put a lot of himself into that character, and so the kind of things that he's experiencing in his life. There's obviously some differences in that Robinson was married to his wife until he died,
Mhm.
whereas Banks, his marriage dissolves and he ends up living alone. And in this one interview that I listened to, he talks about how Banks becomes a bit withdrawn, and he just wants to have a glass of whiskey and listen to music at night, and he doesn't want to see people. And Robinson says, but that's not me.
Mm,
But I think the some of the personality traits that Banks has, I think they shared.
mhm, mhm. One reviewer said his plots had the precision of a Swiss watchmaker, and I would agree. They're complex, they're very intriguing. I know, for Gallows View, like, page 1, I was just, like, completely invested, so he definitely has that ability to grab you, but I think as much as the plot, I loved his pacing. Like, I felt
Mm,
like he's dribbling out the clues and the information so slowly, but it never got boring. And that's just such a unique skill to be able to do that, because I'm like wanting to know what happens next, and he's just dribbling it out.
yeah, no, I agree. And I also read Gallows View, and then I read a couple of other. I had previously read some of his books before we decided that we were going to do an episode on him, but I haven't read the final book in this series, and it would be interesting to see that kind of trajectory that Banks takes as he ages.
I agree. Yeah, I hope to work my way through the series and see where he goes. How about his writing methods, Sarah? Did you learn anything on that?
I did. And so this was from an interview with his widow that appeared in Crime Reads. And she says, while he was flexible and didn't commit to a strict schedule, he would generally concentrate on writing for 3 to 4 hours in the morning. I was very lucky that he did not wake in the middle of the night to frantically write. And then later on, she says that he did not plot out his books in advance, and had to keep all of the uh, elements of the mystery straight in his head. And she said he always found it amusing when people would tell him the page when they knew who the murderer was, and he would tell them that he didn't know until much later.
Oh, that's fantastic. I also saw reference that his wife noted that if the writing was going well in the morning, he would go back to it in the afternoon. And if it wasn't, he would go to the pub. And I
Mhm.
thought that was really cute.
Yeah, and if you look at the, list of the books, he generally released one a year until the latter part of his life. Then they were spaced out a little bit more. He wrote a few standalone books in addition to the Alan Banks series. Did you read any of this standalone?
I have not.
So I read Before the Poison, which was released in 2011, and it features a um, musical composer who is originally from the Yorkshire area, moves to LA, has quite a career there, and then returns to Yorkshire, buys this old house that has some secrets in it, and he takes it upon himself to discover those secrets. So the family that had lived there most recently, the husband had died and the wife was hanged for his murder. And so this gentleman decides that he's going to find out the truth behind it.
Oh, wow. That sounds like a wonderful setup. Yeah, I would definitely read that.
Well, and it was interesting because this investigator, he wasn't a professional investigator. So it
Mhm.
wasn't, he wasn't using police resources. It was his own um, his own methods. And so, I imagine it must have been interesting for Robinson to step out of the detective's shoes.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't know how often we see that where somebody writes police procedurals, but then will also do amateur detectives. I feel like those are pretty, separate. So that's really interesting. Going back to the idea of his education, I one thing I found interesting was that here was a guy who had a PhD in English, but he was writing genre fiction. And I really love that, and that, speaks to the idea of having him as a professor because so many times I think professors are encouraging students to write literary fiction
Hmm.
or, highbrow or the just genre fiction gets looked down on in general. And that was obviously not the case with Peter Robinson, and look at the amazing contribution he made as a genre writer.
I get the impression that he was proud of the fact that he was writing genre fiction. But I did read somewhere that he was a little frustrated that genre fiction, and particularly crime fiction, isn't recognized in literary circles as being
Mhm.
significant or meaningful. Um, I think that was one of the frustrations that he had.
Mhm, and rightfully so. And how about screen adaptation, Sarah?
So there was a television series that was developed in between 2010 and 2016 based on his books. And I've seen a few of those episodes and they're quite good. Um, it was originally done by ITV in the UK, and I don't know if they're available. I would look on BritBox and see if they're available there. Um, but in these, it's they pick him up a little later into his career, and his marriage. He's no longer married, and so we don't get to see him as a younger detective, but someone who's more established, and they're good.
I hunted down an episode to watch and really enjoyed it, and I found the actor is Stephen Tompkinson, and I have to say, his portrayal really fit the image that I had in my mind. I really liked that.
So one thing I will say about Robinson's writing, and this was true in both Before the Poison and in the Banks series, is that his characters, his main characters are male, and they always have quite an appreciation for women. I don't know if you picked that up, Brooke. If I had one kind of criticism, I think it would be the way that some of the female characters are discussed. And I wonder if that's just a function of like the time when Robinson started writing. And I don't know how reflective it is of how men think of women, but it was an interesting insight that I don't remember getting from a lot of the other detective fiction that I've read.
Hmm. So I noticed it too, and I was a little torn because, like I said, the Gallows View is about a peeping Tom, and so there's going to be that thrust, right, that this guy is working to watch women. So I was like, okay, maybe it's that. It is the times, right? We're in the
Mhm.
late 80s. There's a little association with noir where we've got that, femme fatale vibe. But I would agree. And I wonder if, as the series progresses and as not only Peter Robinson, but also Alan Banks ages, if that changes at all. But yes, I did pick that up too.
Well, thank you, Brooke. It has been really interesting to talk about Peter Robinson. I have to feel a little bit of pride as a Canadian that he's such a well loved author who chose to live here. And it's been really fun to read a little bit more of his work and to learn a little bit more about him.
Yes, I was happy to be reminded of this series, something to return to and maybe read more fully and see the complete arc of the character. But for today, everyone, thank you for joining us on Clued in Mystery. I'm Brooke.
And I'm Sarah, and we both love mystery. Clued in Mystery is written and produced by Brooke Peterson and Sarah M. Stephen. Music is by Shane Ivers. If you liked what you heard, please consider telling a friend, leaving a review, or subscribing with your favorite podcast listening app. Visit our website at cluedinmystery.com to sign up for our newsletter, The Clued In Chronicle, or to join our paid membership, The Clued In Cartel. We're on social media at Clued In Mystery.